You're watching News at Prime, and we continue with our coverage of the unprecedented postponement of the budget speech over the GNU impasse on the proposed 2% VAT increase. Now, to help us understand the possible implications of this postponement, joining me is Martin Kingston from Business for South Africa. Mr. Kingston, good evening to you, and thank you very much for your time. Before we talk the implications of these postponement, from the business community, how do you view this? How do you characterize this moment? The word unprecedented has been used. Is this a crisis for our country?
No, it's not a crisis at all, Connie. I think we're all disappointed that a budget wasn't tabled that would secure the support of enough people in Parliament to ensure its passage. We're in a very noisy democracy. The GNU is unprecedented, just as perhaps the postponement is unprecedented. And for sure, we need to ensure that the Cabinet is able to support a budget in very difficult economic circumstances, where we've made some progress, but inadequate progress over the past 2 or 3 years. And budgets, as we know, are about balancing the books, about restricting our expenditure, maximizing our revenue. VAT is a regressive tax. We all understand that. But we don't know for sure that that was the only reason why it wasn't tabled this afternoon. And indeed, the indications are that it wasn't just opposition parties or ministers around the cabinet table from opposition parties who had reservations. Now we're going to have that debate in the public domain over the next 3 weeks. I think it'll be a difficult 3 weeks, but actually, I believe very constructive in ensuring that we get all of the issues on the table. No doubt they will be taken into proper consideration when it's tabled properly in the budget of the 12th of March, which is the date, as we know, that has now been set, at which time we'll have to ensure that it gets the requisite support of government. And we see budgets bring down governments all over the world, frankly. That's the last thing we can afford here. We need to ensure, maybe it should have been done beforehand, that we can secure the requisite support for what is going to be a very difficult exercise in 2025.
Yeah. The moment that it is happening, though, Mr. Kingston, I would like to think that it is the most inconvenient. The world is watching us. Tomorrow, the meeting of G20 foreign ministers, that's expected to get underway. How do you think they are viewing this, the world? How do you think they are watching us right now?
Yeah, I think that, of course, it's a disappointment and it knocks people's confidence levels, investors, lenders, and indeed those who are looking from the outside. I mean, the G20 has put us under a very clear microscope as a country. The GNU has been welcomed by business, I have to say, since its inception. We would continue to support it. It makes sure that we have a balanced view at a very critical time when the partnership between business and government and the support that business is providing on key areas that constrain growth need to be addressed. We're not going to be able to increase the level of indebtedness. We know that's a huge drain on the fiscus. We need to bring far more people into an inclusive and growing economy. The sort of level of economic growth that we're seeing at the moment is woefully inadequate. The budget needs to take all of that into consideration. I have no doubt that that will be not only at the forefront of people's minds, but also, as you say, under scrutiny from many international partners, not least of which, of course, is the United States, where we're on notice in terms of the presidential order that's already been given effect in the last couple of weeks. We're living in very unusual, unprecedented times, not just in South Africa, but globally. We need to take stock before we take rash decisions.
How important is it, therefore, that the cabinet restores that confidence? How important will it be that by that proposed date in March, that a speech is actually delivered?
Well, I think that it's critical now that we've committed to a new date. There are 3 weeks within which not only cabinet, but I would have to say the country more broadly needs to buy into a proposition. It's not going to be clearly the proposition that would have been tabled earlier this afternoon. So you're absolutely correct in indicating that those people who form the cabinet of the Government of National Unity are able to commit broadly and specifically to the proposition that is tabled then in 3 weeks' time.
You've already touched on it. The proposed VAT increase, 2%, was the figure or would have been the figure. I think it's important to be careful of our language here. You have said it is regressive. Do you think that the next budget speech, possibly the real one here, if and when it does come and it does not include a VAT increase, will that help settle the markets in particular?
Well, I'm not sure that it will, because the markets haven't responded to VAT. It's the political parties who have responded to the proposed increase in VAT. We have yet to see how the markets would respond. The truth of the matter is that we need to balance our books effectively. We can't increase our level of debt. Our revenue can only grow through tax receipts. We know that there are very few areas where there can be increased tax receipts unless we have higher economic growth, which of course is the fundamental focus area for business in the context of the partnership with government, or we need to continue to cut expenditure. There's no other option that's available to us as a country.
Would there have been a way, Martin Kingston, for this to be sold by the finance minister as he explained away this afternoon part of the reason for this postponement? What I'm asking you is the basket of goods that the people who live below the breadline would normally buy, if he were to say, look at all these items, they are zero rated. It means that this VAT may not necessarily have been targeted to everybody, in particular shielding the poor. Do you think that that would have been a good sell, or it still is a regressive tax in any case, and so scrap it?
Well, it is a regressive tax in any case. We would have had to have looked at the details of those that were exempt, those services or goods exempt from any increase in VAT, and any impact that would have, as you say, in particular on those who are the most impoverished. I think it would be sort of premature to sort of cast judgment on that. The reality is, though, that in some respects, the Cabinet has already voted on the proposition, and they're going to have to revert with either a better motivation for what was already in the budget, or alternative attempts to make sure that we can square our finances accordingly and appropriately as a country.
Yeah. I think as a final question, we're going to have to talk about what it is for business that you would like to see this government cutting back on. I've been listening to the Democratic Alliance this afternoon, and they were, I think, the only party to put out a statement spelling out why they were opposed to this VAT increase. And that is in part that wastage. There's so much wastage in government that if you were to look at that and cut back on that, you look at some of the spending, for example, SETAs that are set to be a complete wastage or run inefficiently. If you fix those, you may actually not even end up needing to implement a VAT increase. Does business go along with that kind of language?
Well, I'm not going to speak for and on behalf of organised business, BUSA or BLSA and the likes. They obviously will articulate their own position. As far as the partnership is concerned between Business for South Africa and government, we are very clear that if there are areas of expenditure that are deemed to be wasteful, and you've actually rehearsed some of those, then they need to be either cut or ensure that we have a much higher level of both visibility and accountability going forwards. And we know what the key drivers are for economic growth, and they are not actually those areas that you've identified as receiving support through a budgetary process currently. We're clear as to what those areas have been. We've articulated them many times alongside government. That's what we need if we're going to address the issue of unemployment and ensure that we have real inclusive growth, particularly targeted at those who are the most disadvantaged currently.
Yeah. Final question to you. With all of this that has now happened, I mean, the first State of the Nation speech under the Government of National Unity, that was welcomed by the majority of the parties, especially the ones in the Government of National Unity. It is some of those parties now that are in disagreement, which has led to this moment in which we are. Do you, as business still have confidence that this government of national unity is the one? All of what we're seeing perhaps are teething problems.
Yes, absolutely. That's a very easy question to answer. I know it's the last question. But we are fully supportive of the government of national unity. We said so at the time of its inception. We continue to believe that there are bound to be areas of disagreement. They need to be resolved in a constructive, productive way going forwards.
Martin Kingston, thank you very much for your time. Business for South Africa representative.